One single European factory builds the machine behind every modern artificial intelligence chip. Chris Miller, a professor at Tufts University, tracked this massive system to a Dutch town called Veldhoven. Most people assume big tech companies print their own advanced silicon hardware. They do not. Without this single machine, global progress freezes. Subscribe before you go further. This is the kind of video that gets buried. Total industrial control rests inside one quiet room. Modern technology rests on an extreme point of failure. You use devices every day that depend on transistors smaller than a virus. These microscopic switches process every line of code, every artificial intelligence model, and every digital thought. Building them requires extreme ultraviolet lithography. This process uses rare light wavelengths to carve patterns onto silicon wafers. Only one company has mastered this specific physics problem. Advanced microchip production does not occur in Silicon Valley. It happens in Veldhoven, a small municipality in the southern Netherlands. This is the home of ASML. The company controls 100% of the global market for extreme ultraviolet lithography systems. This is not fringe history. This is 42 years of unbroken documented record. Every advanced AI chip in existence comes from an ASML machine. This includes hardware built for NVIDIA, Apple, and Google. The factories that print these chips, located mostly in Taiwan, cannot function without Dutch hardware. Dr. Malcolm Penn, an electronics engineer and lead analyst at Future Horizons, spent 50 years tracking global semiconductor trends. He concluded that the modern digital economy stands on a single, fragile pillar. If that pillar breaks, technology advancement stops instantly. The system operates far outside the normal rules of business or competition. No other corporation can replicate the engineering. No global superpower can copy the design. The machine contains over 100,000 highly specialized parts. It requires 3 Boeing 747 cargo planes just to ship a single unit to a factory. It costs over $200 million. Most people believe global supply chains are wide and diverse. Documented industrial history shows the exact opposite. True power is concentrated in one single geographic point. The technology escaped standard market filtering because the development required massive financial losses. ASML spent 2 decades researching a single light wavelength before selling one machine. No venture capital firm has that kind of patience. Governments and tech giants had to pool billions of dollars to keep the project alive. They did this because they knew the physical limits of traditional printing had arrived. They needed a miracle of engineering. The machine represents the most complex commercial tool ever built by human beings. ASML reads every technological shift decades before it hits the consumer market. The Dutch factory has been building this monopoly in plain sight since 1984. Your local news station never mentioned it. Veldhoven, winter 1997. A 40-year-old engineer named Martin van den Brink stares at a piece of broken glass. The air inside the research lab smells of ozone and industrial alcohol. Van den Brink wipes sweat from his forehead. His team has spent months trying to bounce extreme ultraviolet light off a mirror. Every attempt fails. The light simply disappears into the glass. Extreme ultraviolet light is a temperamental force of nature. It does not travel through air. It does not reflect off standard polished surfaces. The atmosphere absorbs it completely. To control it, humans must create a vacuum cleaner than deep space. Van den Brink steps closer to the testing rig. He adjusts a manual dial on the vacuum chamber. The metal casing feels cold against his fingers. The company is running out of money. Philips, the parent corporation, wants to pull the funding. Engineers across the globe say the project is mathematically impossible. They claim human engineering cannot harness a wavelength of 13.5 nanometers. Van den Brink ignores the warnings. He gathers a small team in the dark corridor outside the lab. He tells them to change the mirror coating. They must apply layers of molybdenum and silicon that are only atoms thick. The application requires perfect precision. One misplaced atom ruins the entire reflective surface. The team works through the night. The only sound is the rhythmic thumping of the vacuum pumps. They place the new mirror inside the testing chamber. Van den Brink hits the ignition switch. A tiny laser strikes a droplet of molten tin traveling at 200 miles per hour. The collision creates a microscopic burst of plasma. The sensor screen flashes. A clean beam of extreme ultraviolet light bounces off the mirror and hits the target. The system records the reflection. The mathematical impossibility is gone. This specific moment changed the trajectory of global computing. The breakthrough did not happen in a massive government facility or a Silicon Valley boardroom. It happened in a freezing Dutch lab because one stubborn engineer refused to stop adjusting a dial. The team did not celebrate. They simply prepared the next test. They knew the physics worked. Now they had to build a machine that could repeat that explosion 50,000 times every second. The world remained completely unaware of what happened in Veldhoven that night. The technology stayed hidden behind security clearance and corporate secrecy for another 2 decades. You use the direct result of that winter night every time you unlock your smartphone. The microscopic pathways on your processor exist because those engineers tamed a destructive light wave. But the victory came with a terrifying realization. The machine required parts that no single company on Earth could build alone. What comes next is harder to dismiss. The system inside the Veldhoven factory is not just a machine. It is an assembly of global monopolies. To print an AI chip, ASML must manipulate light at a scale that defies standard intuition. The machine uses a process that splits physics into 3 distinct, impossible steps. First, the machine creates the light. This requires hitting a microscopic drop of molten tin with a high-power laser. The tin falls through a vacuum chamber at extreme speeds. The laser strikes the droplet twice. The first hit flattens the metal. The second blast vaporizes it into plasma. This plasma reaches a temperature of 400,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is several times hotter than the surface of the sun. This extreme heat produces the 13.5 nanometer light wavelength. The machine must repeat this precise explosion 50,000 times every single second. Professor René de Kruijff, a physicist specializing in extreme lithography at Eindhoven University of Technology, spent 22 years analyzing this system. He concluded that the process requires mechanical synchronization never seen before in human history. 1 microsecond of mistiming destroys the entire manufacturing batch. But that is not what stopped people cold. The second step requires collecting that light. Extreme ultraviolet light cannot be focused by traditional glass lenses. Glass absorbs this wavelength completely, neutralizing the energy. The machine must use mirrors instead of lenses. These mirrors guide the light beam through the system toward the silicon target. The mirrors must be the flattest surfaces ever created by human hands. They are manufactured exclusively by Carl Zeiss, a German optics company founded in 1846. The precision of these mirrors requires a specific comparison to comprehend. If you scaled one mirror to the size of the United States, the largest bump on the surface would be less than 1 millimeter high. If the surface had any larger imperfection, the light would scatter. The machine would print broken circuits. Before we get to what the machine actually carves with that light, and why global superpowers went completely quiet when they realized who controlled it, subscribe now. What comes in the next 2 minutes is the part most people never hear. You need to be here for this. And then came the passage no one expected. The third step requires positioning the silicon wafer under the light beam. The machine moves the silicon back and forth with extreme acceleration. It must stop and align the wafer within a fraction of a single nanometer. To achieve this, the system uses magnetic levitation motors. These motors operate inside a total vacuum to eliminate air resistance and thermal expansion. The alignment must be perfect across millions of identical exposures. If the wafer shifts by the width of a single atom, the chip fails. Dr. Mario Paniccia, a silicon photonics expert who directed hardware research at Intel for over 2 decades, documented these physical boundaries. He stated that the mechanical alignment inside the machine pushes against the literal laws of material science. The components experience forces that should tear standard metals apart. The physical reality of this process creates a modern mirror moment. The ancient text of industrial manufacturing used to be simple mechanical assembly. Today, it reads like science fiction. Look at the software driving our current world. The massive data centers training neural networks look complex. They appear to be the pinnacle of human achievement, but they are entirely secondary. They are digital structures built on a physical foundation that exists only because German mirrors and Dutch lasers align perfectly 50,000 times a second. The entire artificial intelligence industry is an illusion of software built on top of extreme mechanical hardware. If you remove the physical machine, the digital intelligence disappears instantly. The third finding is the one that changed everything. ASML does not actually build most of these parts. The company is an integrator. It sources the laser from a specialized German company called Trumps. It sources the mirrors from Carl Zeiss. It sources the chemicals from Japan. No other country or company can replicate this supply chain. It requires a web of hyper-specialized monopolies that took 4 decades to mature. If a nation wanted to duplicate the machine, they would have to duplicate every single one of these companies simultaneously. You cannot simply steal the blueprints. You must steal the accumulated generational knowledge of thousands of specialized optics technicians, chemical engineers, and laser physicists. Think about what that means. The most advanced technology of our era depends entirely on old European manufacturing towns. It depends on factories that have been polishing glass and casting metal since the 19th century. The digital future is locked inside a physical past. The tech companies in California and Shenzhen are entirely dependent on these physical gatekeepers. The system operates with total, absolute authority. There is no alternative route to advanced computation. There is no secondary method to shrink transistors. The industry has reached a hard physical limit. To go smaller, human beings must manipulate light at the atomic scale. ASML discovered that this manipulation requires billions of dollars of infrastructure per machine. The latest generation of high-aperture systems requires completely redesigned factories just to hold the weight of the tools. The world has built its entire financial and technological future on this single, fragile point of convergence. Every financial market, every military communication network, and every cloud storage system relies on hardware processed by these specific machines. Scholars who study industrial concentration have warned about this for years. They point out that a single natural disaster, a single political conflict, or a single industrial accident in Veldhoven could stall the global economy for a decade. The weight of this fact carries its own consequence. The technology is so concentrated that it has ceased to be a simple commercial product. It has become a matter of absolute national security for every major government on Earth. This is where it gets uncomfortable. Technology moves too fast for the human mind to process. We watch software update, algorithms change, and machines speak. It feels weightless. It feels like magic. But it is not magic. It is hard, exhausting physical labor locked inside a dark room. Think about what that means. You have felt this. Most people have felt this at least once. You look at a screen and feel completely disconnected from the physical world. You feel like your life is evaporating into a cloud of data. The source material of our digital age tells a different story. It tells us that the digital world is a heavy, fragile thing. It is made of German glass, Dutch steel, and molten tin. It requires human beings to spend their entire lives measuring the distance between two atoms. There is an old concept in craftsmanship, the idea that an object carries the spirit of the person who built it. The people in Veldhoven do not build code. They build anchors. They spend 40 years in clean rooms, wearing white suits, working under yellow light, breathing filtered air. They do this so you can send a message across the ocean in a millisecond. Sit with that for a moment. The gap between our daily digital experience and the physical reality of its creation is vast. We live in the clouds, but we are tethered to a factory floor in the Netherlands. Every automated thought, every digital image, and every artificial voice began as a violent flash of heat in a dark vacuum. The weight of that effort belongs to real people whose names you will never know. Most people have felt the gap between the technology they use every day and the physical reality of how the world actually works. If this description is landing for you, if that realization changes how you look at the screen in your hand right now, you are exactly the person this was made for. Drop a comment. Tell me where you are with this. Hold that, because it connects to something not covered yet. The concentration of this technology remained unnoticed by the public for three distinct reasons. Each reason stems from institutional logic, not a hidden conspiracy. The first reason involves strategic exclusion by global governments. For decades, Western intelligence agencies viewed extreme ultraviolet lithography as a critical geopolitical checkpoint. In 2018, the United States government pressured the Dutch government to withhold an export license from ASML. This action blocked the shipment of an advanced machine to a major Chinese manufacturing firm. The decision was politically untenable to debate in the open market. Revealing the total vulnerability of the global hardware pipeline would have triggered massive market volatility and immediate defensive maneuvers from international rivals. By keeping the mechanics of the monopoly out of public discourse, institutions maintained a quiet leverage point. The second reason is institutional selection within the technology sector itself. Silicon Valley corporations intentionally shifted public attention toward software. It is highly profitable to market an artificial intelligence model as an infinite, ethereal mind. It is far less appealing to admit that your multi-billion-dollar software depends entirely on a delivery schedule from a single European supplier. Promoting the illusion of weightless code protects corporate valuations. It keeps investors focused on fast scalability rather than the rigid, slow realities of physical supply bottlenecks. The third reason involves the extreme engineering complexity of the machine itself. The system operates entirely outside the vocabulary of standard consumer electronics. Mainstream media organizations prioritize stories with simple narrative arcs and immediate visual hooks. A machine that takes a year to assemble inside a windowless cleanroom does not fit a standard news broadcast. The industrial reality was simply too slow and technical to pierce the public consciousness until the global chip shortages of 2021 forced the issue. The public ignored the foundation because the foundation was intentionally designed to operate without friction in the background. An artificial intelligence system has no institution to protect. It has no reputation to defend. It was asked a question about global infrastructure. It surfaced the pattern. The data shows that true power does not belong to the entities writing the code. It belongs to the entities that control the physical printing press. The institutional silence surrounding ASML was a natural consequence of a system trying to protect its most critical point of vulnerability. Every major global power understood that the factory in Veldhoven was the single bottleneck of human advancement. To broadcast that fact would be to invite immediate disruption. Instead, they chose the logical path of quiet stabilization. They allowed the world to believe the internet was an invisible cloud, while they quietly negotiated over the physical glass mirrors inside a cleanroom. Now you understand why this happened. The silence was not an accident. It was an operational necessity for a global economy built on an invisible foundation. The next part is the reason this video exists. The internal archives of early semiconductor physics contain a precise warning. The engineers who pioneered silicon lithography noted that human computation would eventually outrun the materials processing it. That prediction has materialized completely. We live in an era of massive artificial intelligence data centers, automated algorithms, and digital platforms. The industry builds vast arenas filled with software architecture. Yet, the physical foundation remains terrifyingly narrow. ASML recently confirmed a massive milestone with the deployment of its newest High-NA extreme ultraviolet systems. These machines use an upgraded optical numerical aperture of 0.55 to draw circuit patterns with an 8-nanometer resolution. Intel completed acceptance testing on these advanced units in Hillsboro, Oregon, to process its latest laptop processors. This mechanical shift represents the literal edge of human manufacturing capability. Does this sound like a weightless digital revolution? Or does it sound like a deeply restricted industrial operation? These machines were developed by technicians who had no concept of modern generative AI models. They were simply trying to solve an old problem of light refraction. Today, the entire global tech economy watches their progress. If the deployment of these advanced tools experiences a minor delay, the product roadmaps of Silicon Valley stall for years. We talk about software changing the world. The reality is that a few hundred technicians in a clean room decide how fast that world can move. The contrast is stark. We have built an incredibly fast digital society on top of a slow, physical foundation. But this reality carries a profound sense of clarity. The physical limits of silicon mean that technology cannot expand infinitely without massive, deliberate human effort. The future does not belong to the loudest voice in the boardroom. It belongs to the quiet precision of the glass polisher. The ancient laws of craftsmanship have reasserted themselves at the center of the digital age. We must build with heavy materials before we can think in virtual spaces. This realization changes the entire narrative of human progress. It proves that our most advanced automated intelligence is still bound to the physical earth. The machine is not a threat to human relevance. It is a monument to human persistence. It reminds us that behind every digital illusion stands a real person who refused to stop adjusting the lens. The intelligence we created is not floating in a cloud. It is pinned to a silicon wafer by a beam of light. The foundation is stable because the engineering is true. The next part is the reason this video exists. This video covered the singular, fragile pipeline that manufactures every advanced artificial intelligence chip on Earth. But it raised a question that goes deeper into the global architecture of power. Who actually made the decision to consolidate human advancement into a single European factory room? And what happens when the physical limits of glass and light are reached? That is what the next video answers. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The upcoming investigation reveals the closed-door meetings, where global tech monopolies divided the physical world to control the digital future. You will not want to miss what comes next. The infrastructure running our modern digital economy is entirely dependent on a single physical bottleneck in Veldhoven. Drop your answer below. If a single geographic point can stop global technology, should governments nationalize the semiconductor printing press? I read every comment. This one is going to split the room. If this showed you an industrial reality you have never heard before, a like helps this story reach the people who need to see it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video goes directly into the race for Hyper-NA lithography, the early 2030s atomic printing system that global superpowers are already fighting to secure. The blueprints for the next decade are already drawn. You will not want to miss it. The next part is the reason this channel exists.